Feeling so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless.
Hey everyone, welcome to Self-Helpless, where science, spirituality, and sustainability are brunch buddies. I'm Delanie Fischer, and details about today's topic can be found in the episode description. Returning listeners, if an episode of Self-Helpless has supported you in some way, a quick 5-star rating or review, if you haven't left one already, honestly keeps this indie podcast alive amidst the big old budget behemoths out there. So thank you for feeding the algorithm a little treat for me. Ad-free episodes are now on Patreon at patreon.com/selfhelpless, and info about some free goodies will be shared in the outro. Okay, it's podcast time. What is a question that you find yourself asking regularly, whether that's daily or weekly, that helps you kind of give yourself an instant perspective shift or clarity, maybe when you're feeling indecisive about something or anything along those lines?
I'm never indecisive.
How do you do that? Please share.
I ask myself the single most important question you could ever ask yourself, and I ask myself this question consistently, and I'm honest with myself about the answer. And the question that I ask myself is, what is it that you truly want? I think most people spend very, very little time asking themselves what they want. Most people, they spend all of their time asking themselves, what is it that they don't want? And they spend a lot of their energy moving away from that, thinking by default, if I move away from what I don't want, I'll be moving towards what I want. But that is actually not true. I can move away from what I don't want and move towards something else I don't want, and then something else I don't want, and then something else I don't want. And we are all familiar with that experience because we all say things like, I just feel really stuck. Well, when you feel really stuck, that just means all the things you're trying are leading you towards other things that you actually do not want. I learned as a young person, the single most important question you can ask yourself is, what is it that you want? And get really honest with yourself about that answer, because that will always guide you to a more prosperous place than the one that you're currently sitting in.
What about the people who say, "Well, I don't actually know what I want."
Everybody knows.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. Do you think that they're nervous that if they are honest with themselves about what they want, that it's gonna be hard to get that thing? Are they scared to make changes? I mean, what's holding somebody back, and why are we saying we don't know what we want?
I think we say we don't know what we want for a bunch of issues, including the ones that you just listed. I wish that like you'd wake up and there'd be a big old billboard that says, "Hello, Elliot, this is what you want." That's actually not how it works. Your body, your intuition, your soul, your spirit, it tells you what you want in ways that you have to decipher. For example, I'm a psychotherapist. And I've been a psychotherapist for like 20 years, and I love it. It's all I've ever wanted to do with my I wanted to be a professional athlete when I was a kid, but in adulthood, this is all I ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I remember like my drive to become a psychotherapist is very closely linked to the abuse and treatment I received from my father growing up. And I wanted to help kids overcome the challenges that I faced when I was growing up. I thought if I could help kids overcome the challenges I faced, if I could help them overcome their challenges, that would be a really fulfilling way for me to spend my career. So my very first job out of graduate school, I went and worked at an agency that was all about kids. And I was like, okay, this is great. And I enjoyed it. Like there was nothing I hated about it. I enjoyed the work. But every now and then in this particular office, my entire caseload was kids and their families. Every so often, a couple would contact me. Well, contact the
Huh.
agency specifically. And my supervisor would come to me and say, "Hey, Elliot, a couple just contacted us. Would you mind seeing them?" And I'd be like, "No." And I noticed I used to keep my calendar in like this binder thing. And every day that I'd come into my office, I would sit my stuff down, I would open my binder just to see what my day looked like. And whenever I saw there was a couple on my calendar, I got excited. I'd start my day at like 10 a.m. and I would get there at like 9:30, 10 a.m. first client. I'd be looking at my booklet and I'd see like at 3 p.m. I have a couple. And I'd find myself looking forward to the 3 p.m. session. That was my body telling me, Elliot, this is what you want. Because that's how it happens. There's no blinking sign that's like, hey, this is what you want. you have to follow the clues. And then later on, when I decided to leave that agency and go open a therapy practice, I remembered that lesson. So when I went and opened my therapy practice, I remember I hired this woman to build my website, and she was like, "What services do you want to offer?" And I was like, "I want to offer couples therapy." And that led to me. I've written several books, several of them about working with couples, and it led to me being a leader in the field of solution-focused brief therapy. Had I ignored that and just said, "No, I'm going to work with kids because that's what I've decided," I probably still would have been okay. Like, I liked the work, but it wouldn't have turned into what my career's ultimately turned into. So when people say to me, "But Elliott, I don't know what I want," it's always a clue to me. You're not looking at the signs. Like, you're
Mm.
not paying close enough attention to that thing that makes your heart flutter, or you're not paying close enough attention to that thing that just gets you excited. You're not paying close enough attention to the thing that gets you enthused, the thing that you're willing to stay up late or wake up early to do. Those are the things that you want. And most people just aren't honest with themselves about what those things are. And Delaney, to your point, sometimes we're afraid to take action on them.
Such a good point, and I would love to learn a bit about, solution-focused brief therapy or solution-focused therapy.
Yeah.
What is it? What are the benefits, and how is it differ than maybe traditional talk therapy that we hear about?
Yeah. So solution focused brief therapy, it's a form of therapy that was developed in the 1970s, a little over 40 years ago. And it's all about helping the client to articulate what they want and then make changes in their life that fit with those desires. That's what solution focused brief therapy is about. Traditional psychotherapy is about unpacking and resolving problems, which is useful, but it takes a lot of time and it's typically a harder process for a client to go through.
Mm,
Whereas solution focused brief therapy is about helping the client to articulate what it is they want and then what kind of changes do they need to make in their life to achieve the thing that they want.
gotcha, and how do you respond to maybe, like, the criticisms around this kind of therapy, calling it, simplistic or superficial or, what are your responses to the critiques about it?
I think the critiques are dumb and uninformed. Um, there's a body of research supporting this way of working. So, number one, like, I don't argue with people who tell me that they think the earth is flat. There's a body of research to make it clear to you that the earth is round. And I would say the
Right.
same thing about this. Like, there's a body of research that supports this way of working. And I
Yeah.
spend a lot of my time educating the field of psychotherapy, and I actually think it's finally making a difference. I think people are paying attention. I think people are listening. I think people are starting to get like, oh, this really is a very different way of doing this job.
Do you think people also get caught up with believing that they have to have everything figured out to state what they
Oh, for
want?
sure.
Like, "Oh, I want to be this profession for 25 years and then pivot into this." But sometimes it's just asking, "Well, do I wanna do the dishes or the laundry right now? What feels better?"
Yeah, like,
So
I think most people have, like, perfect timing syndrome, where it's like, "I'll do it when everything's right."
Yes.
But I just think you just have to take action. You
Yes.
just have to do.
The thing that you want changes, right? It evolves over time, like you working with kids and
Right.
then working with couples and then writing
That's right.
the books that you have. So, how do we develop that process with ourselves where we continue to check in about has what I want changed? How is your relationship with that part of yourself?
I think just by consistently checking in exactly that way. Like, I literally and some people journal, some people, whatever, but whatever your process is, make sure you're asking yourself, like, "Is this what I want? Am I pursuing something that really fulfills me?" And give yourself permission to answer honestly. That's okay. Like, you might wake up one day and think, I love my husband or wife, but I don't want to live in the place we live anymore. Like, I met a guy, I travel a lot for work giving lectures, and I met a guy, maybe one of the most happy, kind of satisfied looking human beings I ever met. I was on a safari in South Africa. And as you can probably imagine, when you're on a safari in South Africa, just about everybody you meet speaks with a South African accent. And then I meet this guy who spoke with a very obvious American accent. And I said to him, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Cleveland." And I was like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And he said to me, "I came here on vacation 8 years ago. And the bush stole my heart. So when I got home, I said to my wife, I don't want to live here anymore. I want to live in the bush in South Africa.
Wow.
Now, before I tell you how his wife responded, that's a very courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
He had to be really honest with himself when he got to the bush. And if anybody's ever gone to the South African bush, it really is magical. Now, I'm happy to vacation there occasionally, but he wanted to live there. So it takes a level of honesty to be like, wow, I really want this magic in my life every day. Then he's got to come home and speak to his wife and say, this Cleveland, Ohio thing, I really don't want it anymore. I once wanted it. Now that I've been exposed to this other thing, I want something different. To his luck, she said, I'm willing to give it a try.
Wow.
And they moved. He got a job working as a safari, and they live in South Africa up to the time where I met them. That to me is a man who understands the secret of life, which is, and you know what? He might wake up one day and be like, okay, I've been in the bush for a few years. I'm ready to go back to Cleveland. Or maybe I want to try something different.
Yeah.
But in any given moment, due to the things that you're exposed to, you're an evolving creature as a human being. So it's okay if your desires or things you don't desire move throughout your life cycle. That's okay.
Yeah. What about the people who might say, but I don't trust my wants, right? I seem to want something different every single day and I keep changing my mind. How do you find the balance of knowing when to act on a decision and knowing when you need to give something time to develop or blossom a little bit before you get a more accurate read on a want?
That's such a good question. I'm glad you asked it because there's a difference between like what I want on the surface level and what I want on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Like, and food is a great example, right? So, what do I want? Well, I want a deep fried double cheeseburger with a side of pizza, and like, but that would satisfy me in that moment.
Yeah.
But on the deeper level, what do I want? I want health. So when I'm talking about what I want, I'm talking about like that deeper stuff
Mm.
because on the surface level, that stuff moves all the time. Like, oh, I'm in the mood for a burger. I'm in the mood for pizza. I'm in the mood for French fries. I'm in the mood for Mexican food, Italian food. Like that stuff moves. But my desire, what I actually want is health. That doesn't move. So the people who are like, what I want changes almost daily. I would tell those people to go deeper underneath those daily experiences. What's the long-term aim that's really connected to your soul and your spirit and who you actually want to be? Because ultimately, I want to be a healthy person. Well, that's going to require me to make certain choices as I go about that. Ultimately, I want to be a fulfilled person. That's going to require me to make bigger picture decisions about my life and career. It's going to require me to make certain choices to stay the path. And when anybody tells me, like, I don't trust what I want because it seems to change every day, I always say to that person, no, 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 go deeper. Like, go real deep. Like, what does my heart and soul want? Like, not what does the flesh want, but what does like my heart and soul want on a really deep level?
That is such great advice, and it even brings up something for me of the things that don't change, right? Like, I can think of just career-wise, having flexibility in my schedule has always been something that I wanted and craved and wanted to work towards, and now that I have it, I never wanna go back, but the way that I've implemented that has changed. I've worked in different industries, I've had different jobs and roles,
Right.
but that want has never changed, and I think that is such a great way to put it, so
But
thanks for expanding on
But
that,
that's
yeah.
exactly right, Delaney.
Yeah,
Like, there's no possible way you could have envisioned having a podcast 10 years ago because they didn't
yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
What you wanted on a really deep level was freedom in your schedule.
Yes.
So as different media gets created for you to create things, now you're like, oh, I had no idea that podcasting was a thing, but now that I know it's a thing, that falls in line with my big picture vision of having freedom in my schedule. I can create a podcast from my home. I can create a podcast on vacation. I can create a
Yeah.
podcast anywhere I can sit in my backyard and do it. This new thing that someone created called podcasting fits perfectly in line with who I'm trying to be as a person, which is a person who has flexibility in their schedule. That's how we
Yeah.
make decisions.
And I think that could help people maybe strengthen the trust they have in themselves if they have been identifying with somebody who doesn't know what they want and they feel confused about it all the time. If you, like you said, if you go deeper, what's the thing that
Yeah.
maybe hasn't changed in a long time that's still true for you? I love that advice. That is so, so good. You mentioned that we tend to ask ourselves questions like what we don't want, and that can kind of keep us stuck. Are there other common questions that you find people ask themselves that might be keeping them stuck without realizing it, that have just become so normalized we're not rethinking how to ask ourselves questions?
I think the number one thing actually that keeps people stuck is their pursuit and even their unconscious pursuit of comfort as opposed to greatness. And the greatest story that I could tell about this. Now, Delanie, I can't tell how old you are.
35.
35. Okay, I was going to say I'm not asking a woman that kind of question, but I'm 48. I'm about to turn 49 in a few months, and I remember a world when there was literally no exaggeration. Some of you who are a little bit younger, like if you're like in your mid 20s listening to this, what I'm about to say is going to blow you away, but it's true. I remember a world where literally on every corner in every town throughout America there was a store called Blockbuster Video.
Oh, yes. Yes.
These things were everywhere. And you could not have told me, and I actually had a job at Blockbuster Video in 1996. If you had told me in 1996 that 10 years later, by 2006, they'll be gone, I would have told you you're absolutely insane.
Yeah.
You're bonkers. Like there's no way Blockbuster Video is going anywhere. They were everywhere. When Blockbuster Video was making $6 billion a year in revenue, this teeny tiny company called Netflix, who was $50 million in the hole, went to Blockbuster Video and said, we have a proposal for you. We want to combine forces, Blockbuster Video and Netflix Video. You run the brick and mortar stores, and we'll run the online part of your business. We want to give your customers the option when they rent a video, they can return it in the store or by mail. And they can also rent a video in the store or by mail. And we will take care of the online part of the process. The Blockbuster Video guys did not go with that option. And the reason they didn't was because they were making $6 billion a year in a way they were very comfortable. So they turned it down. And obviously that was the worst mistake in the history of American business.
Ooh, yeah.
Because the people they turned down ultimately put them out of business because they weren't willing to be uncomfortable. And we confuse happiness on a deep soul level with comfort.
Ooh,
We think if I'm very comfortable, then I'm happy. No. Comfort can kill you, as it did Blockbuster Video. You have to ask yourself, what makes me happy on a much deeper level? If I were in that meeting between Blockbuster and Netflix, and I heard the Blockbuster guys say, no, we're going to turn this option down, I would have said, but what do you guys want? Because on a deeper level, what they want is to be the continued leader in renting movies. But they lost sight of that. And in that meeting, what they wanted was to preserve the $6 billion a year they were making. Now, again, if you're young enough, you probably don't even know that movies were once rented. Because Netflix went from a rental service, because that's how Netflix originally started.
Yeah, I remember. Yes.
Now it's a streaming platform, and we no longer need to rent anything because all we have to do is pay whatever fee we pay per month, and we have access to the whole library. We can stream it whenever we want. And Blockbuster they'd continue to be the leader if they remembered what we actually want is to continue to be the leader in this space. But they lost track of that. Now, Delanie, you said something I think is really cool, which is like you haven't lost sight of the fact that like what I want is flexibility in my schedule.
Yeah.
So you keep making choices that are in line with that desire.
Right.
People get in trouble when they ask themselves, like, what makes me happy? And they confuse comfort and happiness. And Delanie, I want to use Delanie as an example for everybody listening. In order for her, now I just met Delanie today. Seems like a wonderful person. Nice to meet you. But I'm gonna say something, and I'm 100% confident this is true. In order for Delanie to stick to her desire of having flexibility in her schedule, there have been times in her life where she must have chosen uncomfort. For example, like a minute ago, we were just talking about podcasting. When she learned about it, when she heard about it, she had to then learn, how do I do this? How do I upload it? How do I edit stuff? What kind of equipment do I need to acquire? All of that stuff is uncomfortable. But why did Delanie do it? Because whether it's comfortable or not, it is in line with her big desire, which is having flexibility in her schedule. So she did it. So she went about doing it. And now she has the equipment and she knows how to edit and she knows who to hire and she knows what platforms to use. She knows how to find guests and all of the things.
Yeah.
But most people are just not willing to be uncomfortable because when they ask themselves, what do I want? They confuse what makes me happy on a deeper level with what makes me comfortable.
So true. It's been very uncomfortable at times, and there's been a lot of sacrifice too. Because the thing that
Right.
I want I want flexibility more than I might want status or money, or obviously those things can be helpful or important at times, but this really does outweigh almost everything when I consider my pivots and career goals. So that is very true, and I know your book also talks about this relationship between peace and discomfort. What really is peace then? If discomfort does exist in that relationship, what does that actually mean?
It means different. It means like different things to different people. But I think the number one way I can articulate peace is when you are functioning in a congruent way. Because the truth is, I can take any human being and make their lives better, and I can take any human being and make their lives significantly worse. For example, I love my job. I love sitting at this desk and delivering lectures and doing interviews like this and recording my content. This is where I sit and write my books. Like, I like my life and I like my job. And we know this is true through research in the field of psychotherapy. If you took me and you made me get a job as a CPA, within a year, I would have diagnosable levels of psychological issues.
Mm,
Because, like, what is peace? Behaving in a way that is completely congruent to who you are. So,
yeah.
what is the absence of peace? Is when we get off track. And most of us are off track. Most people are not living a life that is congruent to who they actually are.
If you are not living in a way with who you truly are, these things pop up, the psychological issues, which means maybe if certain people change their situation, they will have different outcomes, right? And in the book,
For sure.
you have an example, you share about your mom and her history of mental health, right? And just making a move back to Chicago changed a lot for her. Can you share a little
Man,
bit about that and how it relates to the work that you do and the belief that you have in this?
you're going to make me cry. My mother is my hero, so it's sometimes hard to talk about her.
Yeah.
Um, but my mother is my hero. And my dad was really abusive, my mother's husband, so she dealt with all that. And I always tell people my mother paid for my life with her mental health.
Mm,
And she struggles with bipolar disorder and would have episodes of mania. It was really, really difficult to watch at different points. We moved to Texas. I came here to go to college. My mother and my younger brother moved here, and my mother continued to struggle for years. This went on for years and years and years. I ultimately became a psychotherapist, and I started. I had a very successful therapy practice and was able to take some of the financial stresses off of my mom. And then one day, my mother called me and she said, I'll never forget these words. She said, I'm ready to go home. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I want to move back to Chicago. I was born in Chicago. My mother's like, that's where my family like headquarters is, aunts, uncles, like everybody lives in Chicago. And
yeah.
my mother calls me and she says, I'm ready to go to Chicago. So my best friend and I, we go to my mom's house and we put all of her stuff in a U-Haul. I bought my mom a plane ticket and flew her to Chicago. So there are these homes on the west side of Chicago. Our family owns two buildings, and they're next door to one another. And my mother was moving into one of those buildings. And so my mom flies and she goes and lives in her unit in these two multifamily buildings. And over the next few weeks and months, I notice her psychological issues are stabilizing.
Wow.
And I get really interested in this. Like, what is going on? I've spent my whole life studying depression, anxiety, and treatment. And, here I am, this like growing psychotherapist. And now I'm watching my mom become a version of her that I didn't know. My mother has been a very particular way the whole time growing up. And now here she is. I'm in my 30s And my mom's moved back to Chicago, and a new version of my mom is beginning to show itself.
Wow.
So I asked her siblings, my aunts, and they said, "This is how we know her." And then they told me that your father removed her from like the family unit and moved her to Massachusetts, and she was not ever really able to like be a part of the family in the way that she was prior to that. And now here we are all these years later, and time has passed, and some people have passed on, and life's a little bit different. But now my mom is living back in the bosom of her family, and the psychological issues are significantly different. That's such a huge lesson to me because I spend a lot of my time now talking to psychotherapists and teaching them like the problem isn't that the client has some sort of like diagnosable problem.
Yeah.
The problem usually is they're in a wrong environment. And when you change their environment and you change their experience, you change their psychological how they present psychologically. And I'll use myself as an example. I happen to not drink, I don't use drugs, I don't smoke, but I'm 100% convinced if you made me a CPA tomorrow, a year from now, I'd probably drink
Mm,
because you've taken me out of an environment that's congruent to me and you've put me in an environment that is incongruent to me. There will be a psychological consequence for doing that.
yeah.
And I love when people realize like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with what I'm doing. And
Right.
the beautiful thing about that is you can change what you're doing. And that to me is the most powerful thing I've ever learned in my life.
Yeah. Because you've been in this field a long time, I'm so curious about your thoughts on what do you think might be obsolete in the next 10, 20, 50 years when it comes to labeling people and their mental health and diagnoses in this way, based on your
Yeah.
experience and what you've seen, how people have transformed in certain ways?
Wow. That is a brilliant question. What do I think might be obsolete? I think therapy as we know it will be obsolete. And by the way, I think that's a good thing. A lot of therapists are going to be punching me for saying that, but I think therapy as we know it will be obsolete, and I think it's a good thing. As we've been taught, therapy is about identifying a problem, labeling a person, and then trying to help them learn different behaviors. I think with the growth of AI, and I think with the growth of people becoming more aware of like this idea that there's nothing wrong with me, I think that therapists are going to have to do a much better job of focusing on change. And instead of labeling people, we're going to have to delabel people. I hope that that's what actually happened, but I do. I think therapy as we know it will be obsolete.
What about, the person who recognizes that they believe that if they were able to change their environment or something about what's going on with them, that they would feel differently, but they feel like they can't change it for whatever reason. Maybe it's a financial thing, maybe they're stuck in a certain location. What do they have control of, would you say? And any kind of words of wisdom for that person tuning in?
Maybe you can't move to South Africa, but you can go and take a walk in nature. Maybe you can't afford to buy a Picasso because you really like art, but you can go to the museum frequently and go look at art. One of the things we make a mistake of is we're like, if it's not exactly as I idealistically picture it, then it's not worth doing. And I would say it absolutely is worth doing. There's a man in our field who famously got diagnosed with polio, and he loved gardening. But when he got diagnosed with polio, couldn't garden anymore. Every single day, he would ask his this gardener that he hired to go get a flower and bring him the flower. And then he would sit in a wheelchair and he would ask his assistant to push the wheelchair and prop him up in front of a bay window that looked out on his garden. And then he would smell the flower and look out the window at the garden. And if you ever asked him what he was doing, he would say, "I'm taking a walk."
Wow.
So the lesson there is if you can't do it in the ideal way that you envision, do it a little bit.
I love
Do it a little
that.
bit.
Yeah, we really can get stuck in that all or nothing thinking. If it can't be this
100%.
idea of perfect, why even try? And like, yeah, perfection doesn't exist. I mean, nothing is ever
No,
perfect. Even when you get the thing that you've been wanting your whole life, you're going to find something else that you might want to do instead at some point, or you're going to want to tweak
that's right.
it, right?
That's
Um,
absolutely right.
I would love to hear whatever you're able to share of some of your favorite maybe examples from people that you've worked with on how they changed something small in their life, maybe based on this type of therapy or asking a specific question that led to a significant impact?
Basically, every client I've ever seen is like that. So
Yes,
I'll give you an example. This woman came to see me. She struggled with depression, anxiety, drinking issues, and she was in, let's say, her mid-30s. And I asked her, "What do you want to have happen in your life?" She said, "I really want to be happy. I want to be the happiest version of me." And I said, "When do you remember being the most happy?" And she said, "When I was around 9 years old." And I said, "What was different about you when you were 9 years old?" And she said, "I used to love figure skating." And then she came up with all the excuses. "I can't figure skate now. We live in Texas. There's not a lot of places to figure skate, blah, blah, blah." But we had a whole conversation about what she loved about figure skating and why. About 2 weeks later, she comes back to therapy and she says, "I've had the best 2 weeks I've had in my life." I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I went to a local mall where there's a skating rink, and I've walked by that skating rink 10,000 times, and it never dawned on me that I could just rent some skates and go skating around." And
Yeah.
she said, "I'm just going to keep skating." And that one little shift realigned her. Like, I don't want to say cured her, but like it had a curative impact on her. And it just kind of realigned her with the version of herself that she wanted to be. And it is very consistent that most people, you stop doing the things that give you life, and then you start wondering, why am I dying?
Mm.
Well, you're dying because you stopped doing the things that give you life. That's
Ooh,
why you're dying.
what a quotable, Elliott. My goodness. And it's so
It's true.
it's so simple, right? Like what are we missing? I mean, how many times did she walk by that skating rink and not go, get up
Right.
there? And I think people get maybe stuck thinking that they have to change something huge. They have to have this overnight transformation to feel something significant, and it could just be as simple as, I'm going to go skating this weekend, or I'm going to do something that I
Right.
used to
And
enjoy, right?
for whatever reason, skating gave her joy. For whatever reason, writing gives me joy.
Yeah.
If you take writing away from me, I will suffer as a human being. And then people come to my office all the time and they say stuff like, "I feel like I'm just falling apart." Well, you stop doing the shit that holds you together. Of course you're falling apart. You got rid of all of the things that hold your psyche together. She
Right.
would go to the mall and she would see that skating rink and she would see 10,000 kids skating and she would see that as an activity for kids. And then she would remember her life and she would remember, I did it when I was a kid. And she didn't even recognize, but wait a minute, it gave me life.
Yeah.
That was like the thing that I did. Let's go back to doing that.
And do you think that concept too is applicable to couples who feel like they've lost a certain connection in their relationship, where
For
you can
sure.
you can ask, "Well, what did you do in the beginning?" That why they say never stop dating each other or never stop bringing in
That's
new
right.
experiences? What would your advice be to couples who are finding themselves kind of in that rut, I guess?
Every single couple I've ever seen, I ask them how they met. And then after I ask that question, I ask them how they built their relationship.
Mm,
And 100 out of 100 times, they stopped doing the things later on in life. They stopped doing the things that they did in the beginning.
yeah.
And my job is to help to remember. I remember this one couple. I hope I can be a little bit naughty.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Yes, you can. This is
in
unfiltered.
this, but there's one couple. They met in college, and they talked about their crazy sex life, and nothing like super duper kinky or anything, but just a very passionate, connected sex life.
Yeah.
And then they had 3 kids. They stopped this like passionate sex life. Through our conversation, they created what they called a sexual bucket list. So they made this list of all the
Yeah.
things each partner wanted to do. And then once a week, they did something on the list.
I love it.
The reason why those sorts of things are so cool is like you just can't stop doing the things that made you who you are. And
Yeah.
it's really easy to stop. Like you have kids, you get more important and more status driven jobs, and the economy's falling apart. So now money's tight. Like I get all of that. One of the happiest couples that I know is my best friend's parents, and they're basically my parents. I love these people. Steve and Marie, if they're out there listening.
Shout out.
Um, Shout out to Steve and Marie. And when they were dating in high school, they started something called pizza night, whereas every Sunday night they'd go get pizza. They still do that.
Oh
to
my
this very day.
god. That is so freaking sweet.
When I was growing up with their son, I used to love going to their house on Monday because he always had leftover pizza. But now the kids are obviously out of the house, so it's just, mom and dad, it's just Steve and Marie. So
Yeah.
now they eat like these little frozen pizzas, but every Sunday night, Steve and Marie have pizza night. I didn't pay attention to it in that way when I was growing up, but now when I think about it, I don't think it's a coincidence that that is the most satisfied, happy couple I've ever known because they are continuously doing the things that brought them joy.
Right. Right. And I'd imagine with Sunday night pizza night is conversation or,
Yeah,
other things included in that. Or now they can actually reminisce about pizza night decades ago also because they're doing that same thing.
decades, decades, decades.
It reminds me, my grandparents were married for 65 years and they had a daily tea time together. I mean, one was Australian, one was Irish, so it makes sense. Tea was a big part of their life, but that really stuck with me. And now I have daily tea time. When my friends come over, they know there's going to be tea. And it's just something that is a given with me every single day. And I love that the simplicity of it. I would love to hear more about the diamond method or diamond approach in your work. If you could give a breakdown of what that is and maybe how we can implement it.
Yeah, so therapy is complicated and so is life. And my colleague and I, Dr. Adam Thrower, we were thinking about like, how do we simplify change? And we spent 10 years researching change and therapy and client work and all the things that we were doing. And we came up with this thing that we call the diamond. And the diamond is basically, it helps you focus on what you want. It helps you create the kind of questions and thought processes you need to have to go and get it. And then it helps you to notice when you're on the right path towards getting it.
Mm.
It's a huge part of our book. Our book, almost all of our work is based upon what we discovered in that 10 years, literally 10 years of examination. It guides all of our work because the people who are really, really successful, and I don't mean successful in terms of money and stuff like that, but I mean like the people who are happy and like really happy in their lives, they're the ones who are really good at focusing on what they want. They're really good at paying attention to the things that they want. They're really good at being grateful to having the things that they want. And they're really good at noticing signs that they're always on the path to having the things that they want, which is really what the diamond is. And if you buy our most recent book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Future, it's broken down in exactly that way. I would like to say it would be impossible for you to read that book and not be happier from having read it.
And I know you talk about like how you feel at the bottom of your diamond, right? Like when you're looking to kind of achieve something. Is there a difference between how people what you've noticed that people who are satisfied, how they're acting at the bottom of the diamond versus the top or any other part of the diamond?
The biggest difference I can tell you is their energy is different. Because when you're living in your purpose, which we would articulate as like the bottom of the diamond, you're gonna have more enthusiasm, you're gonna have more energy, you're just gonna be a better version of yourself. And that's the biggest difference between the bottom of the diamond and the top of the diamond is energy and enthusiasm. Like you're gonna be able to go through your life and go through your day with enthusiasm.
Right. And like you said, if you're in a position where you're not living in a way that makes sense for you, it would be easy to add things like alcohol or whatever else to kind of get through the day, to numb things, to whatever. And when you are living in a way that gives you that energy, I would imagine those things can often drop off just kind of organically. Have you seen that in your career
For
working with people?
sure. Absolutely. And not only, first of all, when you're living incongruently, not only is it easy to pick up those things, it's necessary because you have to
Mm,
you have to cope with the stresses of what happens when your life is not in line. And the other thing I would say, I've worked with people who struggle with real chemical addiction, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin. I mean, like real chemical addiction.
yeah.
And when you help them remember who they actually are, like I have a video of me working with this client. I use a lot of video when I teach therapists. And this man was addicted to crystal methamphetamine. But when I asked him what he wanted, he said, "I want to become the mechanic that I've always wanted to be." Turns out his dad taught him how to work on cars, and he loved cars. But he had made some life choices that made that hard. But when he refocused his life on becoming a mechanic, he just got clean. Like it's a natural byproduct of moving towards what I really want, which is becoming a mechanic. a natural byproduct of that is I need crystal methamphetamine much less.
So what is the saying? Would you agree with that saying that the opposite of depression is vitality or purpose,
They're
and they're not
missing
living it?
purpose. They're
Yeah.
missing purpose.
I would love to know if you could add one chapter to your most recent book based on what you've either learned or experienced since it got published. What would
Oh,
that
wow.
chapter be about? Because I know it's been out for about a year? Is that right? Or
Not about a year. If I could write an additional chapter, it would be about society and it would be about politics, but not in a partisan way, like liberal versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat. I would love to talk about, as a society, we have to do the same thing that we need to do as individuals. Like, as a society, we have to ask ourselves, what are we trying to create? And as a society, we have to be more loving and more nurturing to the people around us. So if I could add more to my book, I wish, and even now, like, I wish I had taken the concepts that we wrote in the book, and at least there was one chapter applying those concepts to society at large.
oh, that is so good. Yeah, like what can work for the individual can work for the collective. And
Right.
do you find that I find this when I chat with people too, that sometimes what keeps people stuck is this idea that what they enjoy doing has to make them money or a certain amount of money. And they forget to do things just for the sake of it or the joy of it. Would you find that the capitalistic system that we are born into is a huge factor in people's anxiety, depression, all of that as well when it comes to
Well,
finding purpose?
not only that, I think social media as well. I think we live in
Yeah.
such a capitalistic society that we are often driven to do things to make us money instead of do things to bring us joy. And
Yeah.
I also think that, like, we want to live an Instagrammable life. You know what I mean? Like, I want to make sure I'm living a life that I can take pictures and post on Instagram, and people will be jealous and envious and love me. The goal should just be happiness.
Right.
Like, that should be the goal. The goal should be fulfillment,
Right.
and be okay with that. And I think we struggle with that a lot.
What do you think the toughest lesson is that you have been forced to learn in your own life? And maybe how does that impact your approach with helping others or working with others?
Wow. The toughest lesson that I've had to learn in my life is that everybody's life is hard. I used to think that my life was hard and everybody's life was easy, and thus, because I'm the only one with a hard life, like, I felt cursed. But
Mm,
the hardest lesson for me was also the most beautiful lesson, which is everybody's life is hard. And when we accept that our lives are hard, then we stop judging ourselves for the difficult things that happen in our life. And we just get on with the business of creating a life that's worthy of the hardship. So
yeah.
I think the hardest lesson is also the most beautiful. That is, everybody's life is hard.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Elliott, this has been such a great conversation. I've loved chatting with you. I just wanted to give you an opportunity if there's anything that we didn't cover today that you think is especially important for people to know, whether about your latest book or anything else. And then where can people find you, your work, all of that good stuff.
I just want to encourage people to love themselves and love everybody else. I think our society's gotten really self-centered and really selfish, and it's led to some real problems. Instead of being self-critical, be self-loving. And even when it's uncomfortable, love the people around you, even when they're different from you. I think that's the one thing I'd like to add. And in order to find me, you can find me on social media at Elliott Speaks. You can spell my name Elliott, or you can find my website, elliottconnie.com. And I would love for people to stay in touch. Make sure you go out and buy our book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Future. I honestly don't know how anybody could read this book and not be a better version of themselves, which is the whole entire purpose for us writing the book.
Thanks for hanging out with Self-Helpless. Feel free to share this with someone who could use it, and you can binge related conversations linked in the show notes. Ad-free episodes are now available on Patreon, and because I'm practically allergic to social media, the best way to get notified about new episodes is to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or join the email list at selfhelplesspodcast.com, where you will also find some free goodies like a watch and read list and the quote buffet. All right, love you big time, and thank you so much.